Vejo um polegar positivo, estamos no ar. Começa agora o episódio 59 do Clube da Janus Invest, um episódio especial. Antes de eu dar sequência, quero estar bem informado, quero estar preparado para conduzir os seus investimentos de uma maneira leve, de uma maneira descontraída. É aqui no Clube da Janus Invest, o que passa na cabeça dos principais gestores do Brasil e do mundo. E por falar em mundo, o episódio de hoje traz um convidado internacional para falar de um tema muito importante, cada vez mais importante e presente, não só nas nossas vidas, mas nas nossas carteiras de investimento. Para isso eu peço reforços, um reforço pesadíssimo. Sir Will Lander, seja bem-vindo à mesa central do Clube da Janus Invest.
Daniel, prazer estar aqui com vocês de novo, um prazer com todos vocês e vamos ter uma ótima conversa aqui com o Richard.
Lembrando, para quem quiser conhecer melhor, deixa eu abrir um parênteses, esse cara sensacional que é o Will Landers, além de um profissional extremamente que eu admiro. Conheço a história dele, no episódio 7 ele estava do outro lado da mesa e agora aqui para tocar o episódio 59 com esse convidado especial que vem aqui falar de um tema muito importante, tecnologia. Vamos trazê-lo à mesa. So, welcome to Clube da Janus Invest, Richard Clode from Janus Henderson. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
How are you familiar with Brazil already?
Oh, love it here. One of my favorite places to come on holiday, for work, any excuse.
Okay, so thank you very much. It's an honor, and I think I speak on behalf of all the club members. It's an honor to really have this conversation here with you on this very special and important topic, which is technology, which, by the way, you cover it, you run it, you've been a portfolio manager since 2003. Actually, the first question I just did for you, I just mentioned to you before the camera was on. How was to start, to being a tech expert right after the bust of the 2001 tech bubble? How was to get in, really hype in right after the party was over?
My first year I stepped into a technology fund. I think it was up 70% in the first year in 2003, and went to see clients and go, this technology is great. I didn't know anything about it. I'd studied history and I was like, this tech's great, surely you want some of this. And they said, just rewind the chart a little bit, a couple of years back, and then come back to us when you made us whole again.
Yes. So I was eager to ask you this question, but so I jumped the gun because actually the very first question here at the show is actually what do you do in your spare time? I mean, the name of the show is Clube, which is kind of a country club. So what do you do in terms of sports, just to try to relax, to get your mind out of tech, to get your mind out of your gadgets and trying to relax and have some good time?
Yeah, I've got 3 sons. I'm trying to create my own personal 5-a-side football team. So, a lot of football with the kids, a lot of tennis. We like playing lots of sports. It really helps to take your mind off things. Just come back from a ski holiday. We just want to kind of go out and just have some fun, get active. And that's why, love coming to Brazil. The last time I was in Sao Paulo was for the World Cup. And, I know that was a bit of a sensitive subject here, but, we had a great time. It was a great time for everyone internationally. Come over and see what a great country Brazil was.
Yeah, great to hear. But I'm afraid we didn't have such good memories from the World Cup.
It wasn't a good one, right, Daniel? It wasn't a good one.
Did that even happen?
But no, I don't think so. I never watched live replays like in that Brazil match.
Yes.
It's like, oh no, that was another goal.
Yeah.
But in terms of football, just to finish on that topic, your favorite team and your favorite player.
We can tell
today.
you're from England, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm from England. You can probably sense a bit of the Manchester accent or not. But yeah, I'm a Man U fan, so I feel like I should need to learn Portuguese, because if they've got the 3 Brazilians, we've got 2 Portuguese in there. Half the team speaks Portuguese now, so I need to kind of get on it.
Okay, so before I move the floor to Will, so he can really start the conversation on what is your take on the tax space. We usually ask the guests to how you ended up being in the market, but in your case, let me do the proper intro just for every club members here really have a sense who Richard Clode is, and especially who Janus Henderson is, and the importance of this investment company. So Richard Clode is a portfolio manager at Janus Henderson Investors, a position he has held since joining Henderson in 2014. He is responsible for co-managing the global technology leaders and sustainable future technology strategies. Prior to Henderson, Richard held position with Gardner Moore Capital and Pioneer Investments as a technology analyst in emerging markets. He began his career in 2003 in technology sector at Harrow Investment Management, where he was a portfolio manager. So 20 years down the road, covering and managing tech companies, and starting in emerging markets. So I think we have a lot of here to take note, a lot of here to learn from you, sir. And again, honored for us to have you here representing Janus Henderson that manages roughly $300 billion. Is that right?
That's right. You're making me feel old. So let's move. Let's move on.
Let's move. I'll move the floor to Will. We'll kick off in our conversation.
Well, but Daniel mentioned that you got out right out of college into tech in what looked like a tough time, but turned out to be a great year. Yeah. Are we in one of those again? I mean, how is sleep these days? Because I mean, after 2022, where growth didn't work, active manager didn't work, questioning whether active management even exists still, we had a pretty decent first quarter. So how are you seeing things now from that perspective?
It's been a wild roller coaster, right?
Yes.
It is, and there's always seems to be something. I mean, you can go back, the last 5 years, there's always been something, whether it's, pandemics or, markets going down, bear markets. Before that, we had presidents in the US that were doing pretty wild things. US, China, got a ground war back in Europe where I am, tragically. There's always something going on. You learn in a long career to kind of take the rough with the smooth and learn not to kind of be too sort of emotional about it.
Yeah, I mean, my following up question on Will's point is that this has been a wild roller coaster, and it tends to get, I mean, I don't know if you agree or not, Will, please, but it tends to get wilder because with all this technology, we have brand 100% access with all this democratization that tech has, all this digitalization. So a lot of new investors, newcomers are joining to the investing community. So we all saw that hype in 2021, 22, this meme stocks and stuff. So the hype is gonna be more pronounced going on, because I think on a way, I mean, tech sales, right? Everyone wants to join the crowd. I mean, you sound smart, sounds clever. You have an underlying structure of, fear of missing the opportunity, the FOMO movement, fear of missing out. But on the other hand, few people really understand it. So it's really easy to invest in tech, but it's really hard to deliver sustainable profit and sustainable return for your clients. And you've been doing that. What would you say it's your secret sauce in this game? How's your investment philosophy?
Yeah, I think the really important thing is to remember, this is investing in the technology industry and companies in technology, but at the end of the day, you're investing in stocks. Yes. And those are two different things. So, you can be really excited about technology. It sounds so exciting. This is fantastic. This guy is telling you about he's going to be the next Steve Jobs or whoever. But at the end of the day, you're investing in a stock. And, for stocks to work, they got to make some profit at some point. They got to make some cash flow. Like anything in life, you're not going to be able to pay your bills if you never bring any money in. Correct. And it's the same with stocks. And, in the last few years, we've kind of seen what's happened with that. In 2020, it didn't matter. Money was free and everyone could kind of, have an amazing time. But then, the Fed starts raising rates and suddenly the party's over and everyone gets found out as to whether they've actually got a business or not. That's what we've seen in the last few years. That's what we saw back in 2009 as well. It's not the first time back in the dot-com crash we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation.
It's very strange to hear a tech portfolio manager talking about valuation, about cash flow.
Yeah, I'm talking about the necessity to profit.
To actually make money, right? So how did you survive during the period where all people wanted to do was to buy the next trend, whatever that is, rather than invest in a good stock in a good company? And how has that changed your investment philosophy over the last 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, you talked about my sleep. I mean, I slept a lot better last year, even though it was really painful time. Much better than in 2020. In 2020, I was like, I don't understand what's going on here. I mean, there was a lot of challenges. We'd never seen a global pandemic, a global lockdown. There were a lot of firsts and, a lot of things we'll hopefully never have to go through again. But when I looked at the stock market, you were seeing things you hadn't seen before. You talked about some of those meme stocks. You talk about the Robin Hood crowd coming in and think everyone can do this. Get a stimulus check, got nothing to play with. I'm bored. Let's buy crypto. Let's go and buy some tech stocks. And, for me, who'd done this a long time, I hadn't seen some of that before. And, you were seeing stocks going up and being rewarded that, I just wouldn't want to own. And that was really frustrating. Last year, I could kind of understand why stocks were doing what they were doing. And when you feel like you've got some control over what's happening, you understand what's happening, you sleep a lot better, and you're hopefully making much better decisions for your clients. So, we've seen it over many years. We saw that, back in the dot-com bubble. It's very similar behavior. People get very exciting about tech stocks. If it's got a website, it's going to go up. you know, you speak to some guy, the taxi driver's investing in .com stocks,
exactly.
the taxi driver's investing in crypto. Those are the times to try and probably be a little bit cautious, because probably things have gone a little bit too far.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of questions, but since we're talking about sleeping, which is a subject that I do appreciate a lot, now looking forward, what keeps you awake at night?
I don't worry about recessions. You know, I think we are going to have a recession. You know, that's not good, but I don't worry about that. You know, I don't worry about inflation and Fed rates anymore, because I think that's pretty much, you know, we've hit the kind of peak of both, and you know, we're going to go into that recession. That solves a lot of those problems. We're going to be talking about rate cuts and inflation going down. You know, what keeps me awake at night is things like financial crises. You know, that's when, you know, the world and the economies kind of stop, and we saw that back in 08, 09. You know, I lived through a global financial crisis. That was scary, right? And you know, we're not seeing anything like that today, but you know, those are kind of some of the things I worry about. The other thing is kind of that geopolitics. You know, I've invested and been visiting Taiwan for 20 years, South Korea for 20 years. You know, you talk to my friends there and they're like, yeah, we've always had a guy, you know, 20 miles away from Seoul that, you know, might want to wipe us out at some point. Or, you know, you talk to some friends in Taiwan and they're like, yeah, you know, there might be some people coming over at some point. You know, they're incredibly kind of relaxed about it, which gives me some confidence. But, you know, that's the sort of thing where, you know, if anything happened there, you know, you'd be very worried about not just the stocks I'm investing in, but, you know, the whole world. We'd be thinking about third world wars and, you know, economies having recessions that we'd kind of never seen before. You know, that's not particularly nice thought to have.
Yes.
So you mentioned the financial crisis. So Silicon Valley, how
How
scary was that for you? Or, you know,
the canary in the coal mine?
right? Or was it just a...
Yeah, I mean, that was a great symptom of, you know, what some of the excesses we were just talking about. So, you know, had very little to do with the companies I was investing in. But, you know, what happened with Silicon Valley Bank, you know, they were in Silicon Valley, as the name suggests, and they were the bank to the private equity industry, the VC industry. So all of those big venture capital funds, private equity funds, they all banked with Silicon Valley Bank. They then gave money to all these startups, these technology startups. They all banked that money with SVB. So this was a bank that had tripled its deposits in 3 years, which is pretty extraordinary. And, you know, what does a bank normally do? Takes in some deposits, lends some money out to you for a loan, for a mortgage. Well, you can't do that. You can't find enough people to lend money out to. So they started investing in some really illiquid stuff, which then got really killed by interest rates going up. And they ended up with, you know, a bit of concern as to whether the bank was kind of a going concern. And then you just got the classic bank run. Now that came because all of those private companies, they don't make any money. They burn cash. So, you know, as they started burning cash, you know, the amount of money that SVB was holding just kept on going down. So this was a real kind of symptom of, you know, what we were seeing in some of those areas of technology that were very speculative, very unprofitable. You know, we'll cut you a check for $200 million and go and spend it on buying some customers, sponsoring that football team, sponsoring that stadium. A lot of crazy stuff that, you know, we've seen, unfortunately, far too regularly. But, you know, hasn't really got anything to do with, you know, the companies that I would want to invest in. So it's been quite sort of compartmentalized in terms of that particular part of technology, particularly in that private world. And, you know, that's a much more difficult space to be in, I think, currently than what I do.
And a follow-up to that. So for the investor that's looking to invest in tech, but it's scared from all the volatility that they're seeing, what are the types of companies that you like to invest? What should people be looking at to invest with confidence in tech?
Yeah, I think you look at, you know, you're looking for great companies. You know, we're trying to invest in stocks, not just technology. So just the fact that, you know, a company's got a website or has something to do with AI or something to do with blockchain, that's irrelevant. You know, we're looking for a company that's a great company that can use technology to do something that other companies can't copy. You know, why do we all buy an iPhone? Because, you know, they do something different to other, you know, there are lots of other smartphone companies, but Apple does it differently, right? So, you know, that's what we're looking for a company. We want a company that's going to be making profits, is going to have a strong balance sheet so that, you know, if there is a financial crisis, if interest rates are going to be high, they're not worried. And then we want it to be reasonably valued. I mean, what is everyone who's listening to this? What do you do when you go to a store? Do you buy the most overpriced thing you can find? Or do you buy something that's, you know, a good value investment? You know, whether that's in a shop or whether you're buying a stock, it's the same thing. So, you know, we want to buy companies that are going to be profitable because, you know, again, if you're going to have cash going out the door in your household, you're going to run out of money. And it's the same with a company. So, a lot of the things I think we all do to run our lives and manage our lives is no different when you come to investing. So if you want to feel comfortable going through a recession, going through higher interest rates, you want companies that generate lots of profit, strong balance sheets, going to grow, even if there's a recession. Those are the sort of companies we're looking for. Great companies, great quality companies.
I got to ask before, just one more question to follow up there. You mentioned Apple. I have this discussion with my wife every other week, or whenever it's time to switch phones. I'm an Apple guy. She's an Android woman. And she's the only one in the family. Our 4 kids are all Apple as well. Where do you stand in that battle? And
you're talking to a guy who had an iPhone 7 until about 8 months ago. So,
and you visited Apple CEO with your iPhone 7 on your
battery.
There's an upgrade possibility. So they've got one more upgrade, one more iPhone they can sell. Yeah. But when the iPhone first came out, I got one of the first ones. Now, why am I less bothered now? Because there's not so much difference. There's not so much difference today between an iPhone and any Android phone you look at from Samsung or Google Pixel or any of these guys. But people forget that Apple sells phones, but it's not a phone company. If you think about the greatest technology companies out there that have been so successful for so long, made the most money, they're actually companies that control operating systems. So what is Microsoft? What's its real kind of mousetrap? What's great about Microsoft? It controls the operating system of computers. And so we all access a computer through Microsoft, through Windows. And it's the same when you mention iPhone or Android. Those two companies, Google that owns Android and Apple that makes the iPhone, they both control the software that allows you to access basically the internet through your smartphone. And because they control that, they end up controlling a walled garden. And if you control the walled garden, you can charge an entry price to come in, and you can make sure that anyone who's in there can do what you say that they want to do. And that's how they make their money, because they control those gardens. And so that's what makes them so successful over time. It makes it so hard for other companies to replicate what they do, because Samsung doesn't have that, Xiaomi doesn't have that, Oppo doesn't have that, Vivo doesn't have that. And that's why 90% of industry profits go to Apple, 10% go to Samsung, and no one makes any money. So when it comes down to actually the phones, are they any different? Not really. Particularly.
Interesting.
Yeah, interesting. Just to go back a little bit in your first topic, because actually you answered 2 topics that keeps you awake at night. One is, maybe there is a financial crisis that could happen, and the other one was geopolitics, US, China. It's a hot topic for us to discuss later. So just to maybe exhaust this first topic of the financial crisis or stuff, we saw important correction of tech companies last year, some rebound this year. But when you look at the markets, when you look at more in terms of position valuations or multiples, you think this was not a derating, but this correction that we saw since the NASDAQ traded at the peak, historical high record last year, probably end of 2021 and early 2022. Do you think the markets now is more balanced? It's more healthy? Like you wiped out the tourist investors, the guy that just was spotting exactly not much knowing what is happening there. You see these tech companies and tech valuations more healthy now?
Yeah, so we're more kind of positive on technology for a few reasons. One, as you say, with that valuation derating has happened, and why did that happen? Because interest rates went from 0 to thinking about 5-6%. So that's kind of done now.
Yeah.
Then you had expectations, which for a couple of reasons. One, we had the pandemic. We had a lot of pull forward of technology demand, which people then kind of extrapolated. That was too aggressive. Then now we've got a recession coming. So growth forecasts had to come down a bit. Again, that's pretty much happened. And then, as you say, positioning. Every man and their dog was overweight technology kind of heading into this. Everyone had technology, and then that had to unwind. Whether it was the Robin Hood crowd, retail crowd, every fund globally was massively overweight technology, and that's completely unwound to the point that everyone went into this year being massively underweight technology. And funnily enough, just when you do that, technology goes up. That's always the way the market works. The thing you least want to happen tends to happen.
Interesting. I mean, you just mentioned that. The way I saw it and the way I listened it, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way you approach tech investing is pretty much old school way. You look to the company, you try to see valuation, you try to get yourself out of the hype or out of the trends, and try to look as every other company and trying to do every other business, resolve a problem and get money from it. and time matters. You've been running around since 2003, and especially in this business, especially in equity investing, valuation investing, time beats timing. But even though, would you see a good timing now after the correction last year that this sector faced?
Yeah, so I've been through a few kind of market cycles, and when I talk to some of our clients, we're on the way up. They used to say to me, "Oh, I don't want to buy technology because it's been going up for so long. It's got to go down at some point."
Yeah.
And then when it goes down, no one wants to buy it because they're scared. So generally, when you look at the long-term history of the stock market, the bear markets, the down markets are a blip. They don't tend to last very long, and then the bull markets tend to be a lot longer. Now, those bear markets can be painful. They feel terrible at the time, but they tend to be a small blip on a kind of a long-term trend. And generally good times to invest have been at the end of bear markets. Now we're kind of 18 months into this bear market. Bear markets don't tend to last that long, so we think at some point we're going to get that new bull market. We're not going to stay in a bear market forever. It's kind of a when, not if, and we're certainly a lot closer to the end of that bear market than we were a year ago. Who knows when that ends? But we're going to start that next bull market, probably in the not too distant future. And so that's generally been a good time to invest in some of the prior bear markets, inflecting back into those bull markets. We've seen in the past that's been a good time to invest for the longer term investor.
Interesting. And now his outfit makes sense. I mean, before the camera was on, me and Will, actually, we were bullying Richard and saying, "Hey, would you like to change your outfit? You're going to talk about tech. Where is your polo shirt? Maybe I can lend you my Apple Watch." I don't know, man. Don't wear a blazer and talk about tech. But now this makes sense. And that's why you've been around so much and delivering a great, solid return.
Yeah, I remember my meeting with Adam Newman at WeWork in the summer of 2019, and he wasn't wearing any shoes, and
Yeah.
I think he just about put his shirt back on by the time he met us to justify his company being worth $50 billion. So
How did that work out for him?
I don't know. Maybe there is a show streaming that tells a little bit of story.
Yeah, exactly. Going back a little bit to fundamentals then, one of the things that hit the market, hit inflation, was issues with supply chain. You've lived in Asia, you cover Asian stocks for a long, long time. Is that still a concern for investors, for you, as you're looking at the companies you're investing in?
No, I think a lot of that's finally easing. It took a long time. And, why did it happen? Well, in 2020, the world stopped. So in 2020, particularly in, say, areas of extreme shortage, semiconductors, every customer in semiconductors turned around to their semiconductor company supplier and said, "We don't want them anymore."
No thanks.
So no thanks, don't need that anymore. So all of those semiconductor companies turned around to their manufacturers and said, we don't need any new fabs, like probably ever. So that stopped. Now the problem with when the demand came back, when the world reopened and we started coming back in 21 into 22, is it takes 2 to 3 years to build a semiconductor factory. So the fact that you didn't start building it in 2020 meant that something that should have been ready in 22 isn't going to be ready until 23 or 24. So it just took a lot of time for that to kind of play catch up. Demand comes back like that, and you just can't build a fab in the space of 6 months. It takes 24, 30 months to do. And then even when you wanted to do that, everyone wanted to do it at the same time, so it was hard to get the equipment, it was hard to get everything. So that kind of has been solved just at the time that demand's now falling off a cliff again. So you've seen it in pretty much every bit of semiconductor land. The only place left that's still in shortage is pretty much automotive semiconductors, but everything else has pretty much blown up already and is in some of the worst corrections we've ever seen. So that's kind of the worst of it, which was kind of semiconductors, but logistics, some of the other areas, raw materials, most of those have now peaked, and those shortages are now easing in most cases.
And all these investments being made in the U.S. wants to be self-sufficient in semis. Do you believe in that? Is it a smart investment for them? Are you looking to invest in any of this stuff?
So, Maurice Chang of TSMC would, if anyone wants to read his comments, put it a bit more sort of bluntly than I do. But, just to put it in numbers, right? The US CHIPS Act is looking at $56 billion over 7 years to probably 20 or 30 companies. Now, semiconductor companies spend $80 to $90 billion a year on building semiconductor plants. Someone like TSMC or Samsung would be spending $30 billion a year. So just the numbers aren't big enough to really put a dent in it. And when you build that factory in the US, it costs about 50% more than doing it in Taiwan. So even when you spend that money, you're just going to get a lot less for it. So they are going to build semiconductor manufacturing plants in the US. They're just going to be fairly small. They're going to try and build some
You're
in
going to
Europe.
continue to have to buy them
in
from
Japan.
Taiwan. And
Yes, you're still going to have to buy them from Taiwan and from Samsung. And it's the same with kind of some of the deglobalization of manufacturing more broadly. I mean, yes, iPhones are going to start being made in India because of what happened, in that Foxconn plant, late last year. But, still the vast majority of iPhones are still going to be made in China, because where else can you get the millions of people who know how to make iPhones and made them every year? Where are you going to be able to get that high quality workforce? It's going to take time to build up that expertise in India. We haven't made semiconductors in most of America for a very long time outside of, Portland, Oregon. So, again, there aren't those people who know how to do it. Most of that.
And Portland's got their own issues too right now, so I don't think that semiconductors will be a main topic there for a while.
Yeah, I mean, since we're starting to talk about chips and semiconductors, the supply logistics of this, let me pick up again the second factor that you mentioned as to keep you awake at night, which is geopolitics between the US and China. I mean, we all know, you can call it Cold War, trade war, but we all know it's a tech war. We all know this is all about a tech race that the two largest economies in the world are disputing. So how do you see the tech assuming the center stage of really two powerful nations with their own political ambitions and agenda? How do you think this playing out going forward?
So, Donald Trump, for all his controversies, he figured out very quickly the one stick he had to, negotiate with China was semiconductors. China imports more semiconductors every year than they do oil. It's the one thing that they need, and it's very dominated by the US. So by controlling semiconductors, you really can cut off, semiconductors are in everything, and so you really can cut off a lot of the ambitions of China to, whether that be in defense, in the military, and in AI. So, you've seen now these restrictions where, it's very hard for a Chinese company to get access to the latest and greatest semiconductors. But, the US has been fairly rational about this. They're not banning all semiconductors. It's just, anything that you're going to be using in latest and greatest AI or in the military or supercomputers, that's going to be restricted, which is going to have an impact. And China will try and, localize that and find alternatives for that, like they did when Huawei had those bans and they had to kind of find another way to build telecom equipment. They'll find their way around it, but it just takes time. It's not something you can do overnight. But, we saw that with the Chinese internet sector. The FANG were pretty good, even though they haven't had access to China outside of Apple. Those internet companies still managed to grow, and then you had Tencent and Alibaba and those companies in China, and we could invest in those. You've seen that happen in smartphones. I think you'll see that in semiconductors. China's going to develop its own domestic industry. The rest of the world will do its own thing, and there'll be opportunities and risks for us in kind of both sides.
But if we're going to have these parallel supply chains and development and all that, it just means that people are going to be doing twice what they could have done once. So it means that, going back to interest rates and inflation and all that, the world's going to be more expensive going forward for everything.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment. I mean, it's already
deglobalization effect, right?
Yeah, right. And it already started in China. When I started my career, people used to make things on the coasts of China because that was the easiest logistical place to get out. But then wages got so high, you had to move further inland, further inland, further inland, and then the entire workforce of China started shrinking. So naturally, inflation is going to go up. So then you start moving to Vietnam, and you start moving to India, and semiconductors have been the key foundational block of technology getting better and cheaper. So it is a bit of an impact, the fact that Moore's law is breaking down, and so semiconductors are getting more expensive. But let's not overhype that. I mean, one of the best performing stocks in recent times has been Nvidia. Now they've just produced a chip that can train an AI model 9 times faster. They're not charging 9 times more for the chip. They're charging double for the chip, but you're going to get as a result 4 or 5 times a better performance for the same price. That's still, we're still doing that in tech. We're making better things, and that's going to enable AI to be cheaper, your phone to be cheaper, everything that's going to be cheaper and better. That's the power of tech. Why does tech keep being so disruptive? Because it's the one industry that makes things better and cheaper. That doesn't happen in many industries, and that's why we find tech being so disruptive.
Interesting. You mentioned that, one way to try to solve this, or the natural kind of situation, China is going to build its own industry, its own development structure in terms of tech and supply chains. But here comes the question, how investable is China? I mean, recently we've seen the government changing some policies, being way more interventionist, even in the tech space, even in internet companies. So, I mean, you as an investor, what is the exposure that you have in your portfolio now in China, and what's your take in China being investable or not?
So, I first went to China in 2004. So, I've seen quite a lot in my time investing in China, but, certainly the last few years I've probably seen a bit more than, even in the prior sort of 19 years. But, generally, especially now, we're very positive on China, especially for the, this year and next. And why? Because they just had 3 years of the most draconian zero COVID policy like ever.
Yes.
And now we're reopening.
Yes.
And, everyone basically got COVID in China in the space of 2 months after that November kind of U-turn. And so, we've seen a bit of delay in that recovery, but now, we're seeing that rapid recovery in China. There's about 2 trillion of excess savings. Chinese save a lot, but, they didn't have anything to spend on in the last 3 years. They've kind of saved another $2 trillion, which I think they're going to be pretty willing to go out and spend. They're going to go traveling. They're going to go and buy some clothes because they can finally go out again and go and do fun things. Mm-hmm. So, we think there's going to be a lot of, consumption spending, and you're already seeing that from some of the luxury good companies reported some very strong numbers. We think we'll see some of the internet companies benefit from that, both online travel, but also, e-commerce, advertising. Once the consumption comes back, advertisers, want to advertise to get a piece of that. So we think we're going to see, a very strong recovery like we did in, a lot of the rest of the world when we opened up, and we know what that playbook looks like. And then, the concern is, is it investable longer term? Is regulation rational? Are policies rational? Now, you always have the concern that with a flick of a pen of someone in Beijing, that can materially change an industry or whether you'd want to invest in it. But generally over my, best part of 20 years, China has been supportive of shifting to more private, enterprise, entrepreneurship, ultimately lifting more people out of poverty and having higher incomes. And with a shrinking workforce, they need to find more, jobs outside of manufacturing. They've got to have more white collar jobs, more service industry jobs. And that for me very much plays into what technology companies are doing there. So I think technology companies, and particularly some of the big technology companies, are very aligned with what China policies are. It's just, we went through quite a difficult period where, the president was obviously looking to, consolidate his power and have his, get another term. That's now been done. So, we're seeing a much more relaxed approach where the focus is much more back on the economy again. And that should be good for, stocks, now that we've kind of moved past a very difficult period in terms of politics and also regulation.
Interesting. Just one curiosity, actually. So you started back in 2003 as an emerging market expert, technology in emerging markets. But my question is emerging markets like a place of, really happening and brewing tech companies or tech ideas, or is it, except China, but ex-China, there are places or countries that they are organized in a way to strive tech companies or tech ideas or something?
So one thing I learned very quickly as an emerging market investor,
Brazil, how you see Brazil as a
is that GDP growth and stock returns have almost zero correlation, right? So, China, a lot of the brick have not been great stock markets over the time, despite growing their economies generally a lot faster than the US, say, or the rest of the world. I think there are challenges and opportunities in emerging markets. One is that they tend to be a lot less developed, so there's less incumbency. When I think about fintech opportunities globally, competing in fintech against established banks where everyone has a credit card, everyone has multiple bank accounts, everyone has insurance already, everyone has wealth management already in the US or in the UK or in Europe. You're not really solving for anything because you already got it.
Yes.
In emerging markets, it's particularly here in, say, Latin America or in Brazil, a lot of unbanked people who've never had access to a bank account, a lot of people who've never had access to a credit card or to a loan or basic insurance or life insurance or health insurance or basic wealth management products. The same in Latin America, the same in China, the same in India, Southeast Asia. That's where I want to be investing in fintech. So I think in emerging markets, less developed countries, technology can provide a solution that would take decades if you were reliant on banks building out across the country. If you can do that, if it's smartphone only, you can get to those people much faster. You can do it in a lower cost way where it makes sense to lend $20 to someone, which for a big bank wouldn't make any sense. You'd lose money doing that. Being able to access funds for the first time, invest in the stock market for the first time with a very small entry ticket. Again, that's not going to work for a traditional sort of offline broker. but it can work for online companies. We think technology is great for financial inclusion, for broadening access to quality education or healthcare. A lot of those solutions will be provided by technology companies, and particularly in emerging markets.
Interesting.
Richard, when we look at what worked in technology over the last decade, there's the term FANG that became known as, if you bought the FANG stocks, really that's all you needed to do, and it was all about the internet at the end of the day and using your phone and all that. And you are looking for what's next. You're not buying. You may have some FANG stocks in your portfolio, but it's really, I don't think you think that's what's going to be driving your returns over the next 5-10 years. So what is that?
Yeah. What is the next hype?
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly.
And do you have the acronym already ready to go?
Yeah, we probably found one or two of the letters, but we probably need someone a bit clever to put it all together. But as you said, the last decade has been all about the introduction of the iPhone in 2007. Everyone getting a smartphone, everyone downloading apps, and a lot of those apps and the time spent being with those FANG companies. Whether it be social media, e-commerce, Google search, and that's now pretty saturated. Anywhere you look in the developed world, even in China, there isn't much, only 24 hours in the day. We've pretty much maxed them out. We spend too much time on our phones on those apps. So growth is just going to be a lot slower there. As we look forward, I'm sure many of the listeners have heard of ChatGPT or used ChatGPT. Now, the reason why ChatGPT is so interesting is it's something that really inflects the usage of generative AI. And by generative AI, we mean the automated creation of content. Whether that be a response to a query you put in, or creating an image from the way you've described it, ultimately being able to create video from what you've just described or written a picture of. This is a really important technology, as you can imagine from what I've just been talking about, and has huge implications for many industries, for many jobs. And so, this is a really important technology that, for us is something that, really democratizes AI. Everyone has had a chance to use ChatGPT in a way that we've not been able to use AI before. And basically, if you can describe what you want, you can get the AI to do it. That's very different to what we've seen with AI in the past. And, we've talked about how, big technology inflections come when it becomes easier to use. Why did personal computing take off? Because Windows took off, and it was much easier to use Windows and click on things than be able to kind of type code and maybe be able to make the computer do what you want. The iPhone took off because it was just much easier to use a smartphone and access the internet than using a Nokia phone or a feature phone. And it's the same with ChatGPT. It's just the reason it's gone viral, the reason why it's got over 100 million users in the space of a couple of months is because it's so easy to use. We can all speak human language, we can all type, and so we can all put something in that query box and get AI to give us a response. And we think that you can use that in pretty much any job that requires writing or creating any content. So whether you're writing a sales report to your boss, or drafting a legal contract, or doing a financial report in what I do. If you work in real estate and you want to write a description of an apartment that's just come in, all of that can be done by just showing the AI the photos of the apartment. Rather than you having to spend time, then you can spend more time going out trying to sell it. You can spend more time doing podcasts like this. You can do more time visiting countries and visiting companies. So we think this is a really important technology that is ready now. It's not going to be ready in 5 years' time. People ask me about quantum computing, blockchain, all of this stuff. That's still many years away. This technology is ready to go now. You're seeing it integrated into all the Microsoft Office suite, into Teams, into all the major apps, whether that be Facebook and WhatsApp and Snapchat. That's going to be in everything in the next 12 months. And that means this technology will take off very quickly. And so, those are the areas that and that's why, stocks like NVIDIA have done very well this year, because, ChatGPT is trained on 10,000 NVIDIA processors. So anyone who wants to do something with ChatGPT is going to have to buy a lot of those processors for NVIDIA. So, we're looking for other opportunities like that, and that will hopefully create, a new acronym.
Because that was going to be my question. So what are the stocks that we can invest in? NVIDIA would be the top one at this point that benefits from this.
Yeah, who's supposed to be the winners? I mean, if I want to set up right now like a basket to really go through this creative generative AI, you mentioned NVIDIA. Is there any other stock?
They're not that many. I mean, obviously, OpenAI is a private company that created ChatGPT. Microsoft's an investor in that. But we're thinking that pretty much every tech company, big tech company, will want to have something like ChatGPT, and to do that, they're gonna have to spend a lot of money building AI data centers that can train these massive models. And so you want to be investing in companies that have exposure to that. So, whether that be, as we talked about NVIDIA, lots of memory, lots of, processors, lots of high performance bandwidth, lots of high performance networking. There are lots of companies that play into those new AI data centers that are going to be built by a lot of companies around the world. So, that's where the opportunities are for us. Less so maybe than, everyone's going to have a ChatGPT service. So, you've got Sparrow and Ernie and Llama and Lambda, you've got all these kind of funny names that are all plays on a large language model, LLM. You're seeing all of these, but everyone's going to end up having one, and maybe one's slightly better than the other, but that's probably not the way to look at, what you want to invest in.
Richard, we're running out of time here, unfortunately. Yeah. Final message for the Brazilian investor who hasn't bought tech, who's happy to get 1% a month and his fixed income. And what should this person be doing with their investment?
Yeah, my message is, if you believe in these long-term technology trends at all, if you believe that ChatGPT and AI is, the future, then you currently in Brazil have no exposure to that. Like zero. In the local stock market, there's less than 1% exposure to tech, and that 1% is not AI. So, I understand that you get great returns just by, investing in local bonds, right? But, if you think about diversifying, you don't have any exposure to technology. So think about, if you're going to have that international equity exposure, think about technology, because it's the one thing that you can't get in Brazil. So, I think that's the where we would encourage people to do that. And we think, we've just had that reset in technology. Things did get a little bit out of hand in the last couple of years, but that's now reset. And for me, as you talked about, fundamental investor, I'm sleeping better, I'm feeling more comfortable. So we think now's a good time to start thinking about, diversifying your investments and thinking about those long-term trends. And surely technology's got to be part of that long-term thinking.
Makes a lot of
sense. Really interesting. Richard, Clode, thank you very much for us to have this timeless opportunity to hear from yourself about this very interesting tech investing. And Sir Landers, was great to see you at this side of the table.
Always a pleasure to be here with you.
So everyone, a todos, muito obrigado. Grande abraço.